should you be an Uber driver or an Uber Eats driver? In this video, I'm gonna explore everything you need to know about Uber driver versus Uber Eats driver. What is the better option? Jumping right into it, number one, let's talk about the income. You wanna know, and I feel like for most people, it's not which one is better, it's which one pays more. Now, I'm on the site sidehustle.com, and as you can see down here, rideshare services currently pay a higher average hourly rate than delivery, according to GridWise data. And they did a bunch of research in terms of different people's incomes. And one thing I'm gonna say though, is going down here, it also depends upon your location. That's why I think a big thing I'm gonna suggest is to try out both and see what happens. Because going down here, let's look at Atlanta, for example, right? Uber Eats pays more than Lyft and Uber. So that almost contradicts exactly what we just read, that Uber Eats seems to pay a little bit more than Lyft and Uber. However, in terms of the average pay, $15.52 per hour in terms of ride sharing versus $12.73 for delivery. So this also includes other services like Amazon Flex or Grubhub, maybe Doordash, right? Other ones. Now going, down here, Uber Eats pays more than Uber and Lyft. Grubhub pays more, but in terms of Uber and Lyft and Uber Eats, Uber and Lyft pays more right for here. Uber and Lyft pays more than Uber Eats. If I, let's say, go to LA, which I'm located in right now, Uber Eats pays more than Lyft and Uber. So it really goes back and forth. Going to New York, Uber and Lyft pays more. Uber Eats is not even on this list. And this is why it's incredibly important to understand your location really is the #1 factor. And I've mentioned this before in so many other videos, but in case of the first time of you watching one of my videos, the #1 factor that determines how much money you can make as an Uber driver and as a Lyft driver is your location. This is a survey that Rideshare did, another site, and although this was from years ago, this just shows that your location really is the biggest factor of how much you can make. Even if, let's say, two drivers drive the exact same, just your location really is the biggest factor of how much money you can make. This is not only true for Uber and Lyft, but also true for Uber Eats. So keep that in mind. Number two, the car logistics. The first thing I want to mention when it comes to the logistics of just driving in general is one super kind of unspoken about fact when it comes to Uber Eats. And that is, if you want to sign up to Uber Eats, you can do so with a bike or on foot. And you can see right here, this is on Uber's site, to sign up to deliver with a bike or by walking, you'll need to enter your name, social security number, etc., etc. They're gonna run a background check, so on and so forth. What I think is really cool about this, especially if you look at Uber and Lyft compared to Uber Eats, is let's say you're like, Mark, I really want to start making money, but I have no money. I have no way to, let's say, get a car. Even if, let's say, you can rent a car through Lyft and Uber, let's say there's some situation with your credit, whatever the case is, I know you might be starting off at, maybe the bottom tier, but just start off by walking. See if you can walk around, do Uber Eats on foot. You work your way up, let's say, to buy a bike. You then start biking. You work your way up to a car. So if you're with Uber Eats, the barrier to entry is a lot easier. And another thing, too, and I know people who do this, actually, let's say you're like, hey, Mark, I actually want to do Uber Eats on a bike to do it as exercise. Hey, if you think about it, if let's say you're biking to and from the restaurant to people's places, that is a workout in itself, and it's almost like getting paid to bike or paid to work out. And I know a lot of people who love doing that. So that's another big thing to keep in mind. Now, continuing now about the car specifically. As you can imagine, Uber Eats and Uber are two very different experiences, which I'll get into a little bit later. But in terms of the car specifically, you don't need a car, let's say, that has 4 doors. There's a lot of rules when it comes to driving for Lyft and Uber about your car. I've done a couple videos on this channel about the Uber car requirements and the Lyft car requirements. And there is a lot, right? You need a certain amount of seatbelts, like I said, 4 doors. Your car has to be a certain model and make, right? You can't have, for example, like a giant van that has the back taken out because you need a certain amount of seats, etc., etc. When it comes to Uber Eats, a lot of that you don't really need to worry about. You just need a vehicle to bring you from point A to point B in terms of the restaurant to the person's place. That's pretty much it. Another thing as well is you don't have to worry as much in terms of Uber Eats about your car's setup, so to speak. Because as we all know, even if your car, let's say, is approved for Uber and Lyft and you can easily drive with it, you have to keep it clean, you have to go to the car wash a lot, you want to make sure it smells nice, etc., etc. And hey, if you want to drive for Uber Eats and you're like, look, my car is a mess, There's no way anyone would ever get in my car. I'd get a 1-star rating right away. Hey, just drive for Uber Eats. You don't have to worry about how dirty your car is, how bad it smells. You know, you don't have to worry about any of that. That's one thing to keep in mind that I remember when I drove for Uber, that I had to always kind of worry, okay, does my car look nice? Does it smell nice? Another thing, you know, especially when I was driving in Boston, is the temperature. For me, I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to the temperature, but I knew, like, say if it was the winter time, I'd actually have to wait for the car to be really nice and really warm. Or like say if it was the summer, the opposite, right? It had to be very cool. And I have to worry about the kind of climate in my car to give the overall best customer experience. You don't really have to worry about that when it comes to being an Uber Eats driver. And number 3 is the overall experience. Now this could be a whole other video in itself, but overall, I feel like this is a very tomato situation. Everybody's very different. So for me personally, I never actually did Uber Eats or delivery driving because I actually like the human element of Uber and Lyft. I love the idea that at any point in time, someone would get in my car and it was someone who I never met before, typically, right? There's one time I did end up driving one of my roommates, ironically, which is crazy, you know, a huge roll of the dice. But anyway, you know, I love the fact that I got to meet so many people that when I was working, I got to have a lot of just human interaction. For me, I'm also an extrovert, so I did like that. But let's say if you're not, let's say if you're like, you know what, I don't want to have to make conversation and talk to people and maybe even potentially deal with drunk people, which is another big thing when it comes to driving for Uber and Lyft, especially on Friday and Saturday nights. With Uber Eats, you just do your own thing. I know a lot of people who love doing delivery driving because they're like, hey, I just play music in my car or I play podcasts or whatever I want to listen to. I drive to the restaurant. I don't have to talk to anybody. I pick up the food. I drop it off. Another thing I will say is tips. Now, this is becoming more popular with Uber and Lyft, but back in the day, tipping was not a thing, which is still kind of crazy to think about that. I remember when I first started driving, I think I got maybe 1 or 2 tips in the first year I started driving. This is way back when, like 2015. Actually, maybe a few more than just a couple, but tipping wasn't that common with rideshare driving. Now it's becoming more and more common, but when it comes to delivery services, it is 100% the staple that you always tip your delivery driver. So you will probably get way more tips as an Uber Eats driver than as an Uber driver. But nothing to consider too when it comes to the overall experience is getting in and out of your car. This is another reason why for me, I just preferred Uber and Lyft more, is when I was driving, I'd drop the person off, drive to the next place, drop the person, or pick them up, drop them off, and I continue that trend. When you're an Uber Eats driver, you typically have to like pull your car over, get out, go to the restaurant, ask somebody and say, hey, is the order for John? John? Okay, this is the bag. Okay, cool. You get the bag, you then go back in your car, you drive to the person's place. Another thing, you know, I think which makes it even trickier as a delivery driver is not getting the food, but delivering it. Like, so you go to an apartment complex and it's one of those ones that's outside and you don't know which one it is, especially for a lot of people when they order delivery. They typically, some people are kind of cool about it where they actually go out to meet you, but for other people, they just want it delivered right to their door. They're like, hey, I ordered delivery because I want delivery and I don't want to have to move. So you're going to have to go and navigate this weird setup just to bring it to their door, which can be a little bit tricky. With Uber and Lyft, the second you get there, they're typically outside, or hopefully they're outside and they're ready to go. These are all these different things to consider, right? And this is why, again, a tomato-tomato situation. Some people I know prefer Uber and Lyft way more. For me, I did. Other people I know prefer Uber Eats or delivery driving way more. And now, a bonus point I want to make is why not both. I read a lot of reports online from different drivers who drive for both just to see, okay, where do people actually prefer more? Like, just to get other perspectives or other opinions. And so many people would go back and forth. I'd see one person be like, oh, I make way more driving for Uber. I make way more driving for Uber Eats. And they'd go back and forth about the pros and the cons. Overall, just try out both. If let's say you're on the fence, it doesn't hurt to try out both because one, it's completely free. It's completely free to do. And two, it's not like they're like, hey, you have to do X amount of rides a week. Obviously, they want you to work as much as possible, but you're not roped into this crazy, you know, hard contract where if you don't work, someone's going to go after you. Just try out both because I even read a lot of reports of people saying, hey, you know, I drive for Uber on Friday nights. However, some Friday nights are really slow. So what do? I turn off Uber, I turn on Uber Eats, and I work for Uber Eats. And people said they go back and forth because sometimes Uber Eats on a Friday night pays more. Other times it's Uber, and it can change night to night. It is never a bad idea to try both because one, that's honestly the number one way you can determine your income, right? I talked before about the Rideshare article and on Side Hustle. Overall, your location is the number one factor, but even so, you never know. Maybe things change over time. It is never a bad idea to try out both apps, not only in terms of the income, but also the experience. Maybe you're like, you know what? I love Uber, but I'll try out Uber Eats. And let's say you start liking Uber Eats way more than you like Uber. Boom. You just drive for Uber Eats or vice versa. The best thing you can do at the end of the day is to sign up with both apps.